the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me on our long-awaited return to the story of Jimmy, Saul, and maybe Gene. Well, first, we might not have Huel holed up in a motel room for eternity here, but we do have the traveling man himself in one. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing good for now. How you guys doing tonight?
Just great.
Right.
Well, that brings us to the rest of our introductions. I'm not sure if she's the Kim of our podcast, but then again, it's not like any of us are Jimmy here. But it's not Jimmy, it's Jamie. Hey, Jamie. How you doing?
Hey!
Oh,
Hey!
I think it was the first time I got to see you on video during our podcast. It's awesome. Just realized that. And of course, finally,
History is made.
Yeah, well, there will be a lot of history being made in this podcast. But you hear something I got planned to rant about at the end of it. Hopefully I don't. No, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, our resident legal expert, which comes in handy, like twice a season, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But I digress. It's Brian. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Good to be here.
So we are back to cover what I would think we might say is the best TV series of the past 7 years. I mean, I think it's definitely our favorite one, so eat a dick leftovers. No, I'm kidding. No, we're here to talk about the return of Better Call Saul. It was almost exactly 2 years ago that the final episode of season 5 aired. Something Unforgivable, which back then left us with a couple cliffhangers. Just to refresh everybody's memory, left us in the situation of, could Nacho get away now that Lalo survived that assassination attempt? And while we've been watching and waiting for the complete transformation of Jimmy to Saul, it turns out that it's Kim who has been slipping and is the one who may be breaking bad on this series after all. But as most folks know, at this point, between COVID and Mr. Odenkirk's shocking onset heart attack, we've had to wait not just 1 but 2 years to pick up where we left off.
Yeah, I looked it up. It was 738 days, so it's a long time. I didn't realize how close it was to 2 years until
if I'm not mistaken, I believe the season 5 finale aired on April 20th. Of 2020. Yep. And we are recording this on the 21st, which is funny because I did say I wanted to record on Wednesday, but anyway. But like I said, 2 years in a day. So let's kick it off now with that double episode whammy. They presented 2 episodes back to back, which more or less flow into each other fairly seamlessly. And I kind of like the fact that they're both 3-word titles in that this and that kind of format.
Yeah, I think they're doing that I'm not sure if they're going to do it the whole season or not, but I saw the name of the next episode, and I kind of wonder if they're going to stick to that theme. But for this one, I assume that the first episode's like a reference to the early 60s movie Days of Wine and Roses with Lee Remick and my man Jack Lemmon, which, kind of would fit the theme of a married couple enabling really bad, stupid decisions together, even though that one's more of like a boozing thing than a criminal thing. The second episode, of course, is, carrot and stick, which are 2 things you need when you're building a snowman. And when you're trying to frame somebody for being on cocaine, they call that building a snowman. So I think it's all safe to say.
You know what? That was amazing. I anticipated the wine and roses thing. It's like, oh, he's totally going to go Days of Wine and Roses. I know that's where he's going with that one. I had no idea where you were going to go with carrot and stick, and that's so good. I actually believe it. I think that was excellent. Really good. Credit wise, because I'm a stickler for that kind of thing. The first hour was Wine and Roses. That was directed by Michael Morris and written by series co-creator and showrunner Peter Gould. The second hour, which the aforementioned Carrot and Stick, was written by Vince Verse, because I hate the sound of Gilligan Verse. Sounds like you should be talking about Gilligan's Island if you're doing that. Vince Verse stalwart Thomas Schnauz, my favorite name of all the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul folks, and Ariel Levin, or is it Levine? I forgot. And more importantly, well, I shouldn't say more importantly because, writer. It was directed by the man himself, Vince Gilligan. So as I mentioned to the guys and gal previous to the podcast and letting you all know this out there, we're going to attack it this way. We're going to go through that cold open, then kind of do what we've done several times before in the past. I know it's been a few years since you've heard us do Better Call Saul. It just seems to make more sense, especially since we're dealing with back-to-back episodes. We're going to break this down by character, which still works as far as these 2 are concerned because they're pretty much completely separate silos at this point in the season. So let's start with that opening. And I'm gonna come right out and say I was at the very least surprised, if not shocked, that we didn't return to black and white Nebraska the way we have at the start of the previous 5 seasons. So I'll before I even get into it, I'll just throw it out to you guys. After like the first 5 seconds, were you like, wait, we're not getting Gene? Because that was my thinking.
Well, yeah, it started out with the black and white, and but it changed pretty quickly, and I was surprised even, and then even more surprised that like I actually never gave any thought as to like what Saul's house would have looked at like in Breaking Bad before or any of that stuff, and just the more you think about it, the more just like you never really spent the time thinking like, well, Saul got like blank percent of all of that money that was in the that they made. I mean, I never even considered how much money Saul had until now, so.
Absolutely.
It was a lot. That was a lot of money.
And it was a nicer
lot
house
to get these paintings on your bathroom wall. Let me tell you.
Oh yeah.
and a Trump toilet.
Well, yeah. I mean, I believe that. I think the toilet was totally just a nod to Trump because we've heard about the golden toilet before, as far as that man is concerned. I love that I do visual jokes for a podcast that no one's ever going to see. I continue to do that. Going back to the very opening, the opening shot, it's funny. I'm going to go out on a limb, or not really much of a limb. I'm going to assume that most folk, 97%, and probably everyone else who podcasted about this, probably assumed that there was it was literally being shot in black and white. Then they started to do some fancy coloring things in CGI, whatever you want to call it. Nope, that's not what they did. Not what they did. Sorry, guys out there, y'all wrong. The first few ties that are tumbling in slow motion are actually monochromatic black and white and gray ties into a white space, and then they just started popping in the colored ones. So I like that they did something which we all assumed was like a digital effect. Like, no, it's kind of practical. I mean, unless you consider the slow motion aspect to be that. So
it was I'm sorry. It was a great play on the promotional the season photo with the black and white photo with him putting on the red jacket.
Oh yeah. I mean, obviously it's everything that we're going to see is deliberate, but the fact that they would even take a nod to their main promotional artwork, it's like, yeah, you think you're going to get Gene, and look at the black and white. Nah, you're going to wait. Now, the assumption I think some are making here, number one, Saul Goodman's home is being cleared out by the feds. I don't necessarily know that's what's happening here, because they're all wearing just very plain brown khaki colored things. I see no emblems. I see nothing identifying them as government employees at all. So
no badges.
And it didn't seem like there was any crime scene, like anything going on there either. So, I mean, maybe just they're moving to a bigger house.
I mean, the only thing, even the moment where there's that one woman who picks up, I think, the bra that's hanging off the bathtub faucet or something, and she does it like with a pen or a pencil or something. It's like, yeah, I think she's just doing that because it's underwear. It doesn't look like, because they're not, I don't think any of them are even I don't think they're wearing gloves or anything. Not at this point that they should need to be, but I was just thinking about it, like, okay, I totally buy that they could be boxing things up and maybe things are going to be put on auction to help benefit victims or whatever. But I don't think these are feds. I was even outside. Do I see any truck or car that identifies them as that way? I didn't think so.
No, it looked more like a
moving company.
Yeah, could be.
No, I think it looked like a civil asset forfeiture, and not like a criminal thing. Like they were just boxing stuff up to put in lots and auction is what it looked like, because when they would gather stuff and put it in boxes, you didn't see people carefully keeping records,
right, and
taking notes of what they were taking to log it as evidence. It looked like they were just throwing it in boxes and not in gathering it in evidence.
Right. There wasn't any I did think that as well. No one's doing any tabulation here. I'm seeing people just picking up piles and just dropping it into a box or something. So they're not being as meticulous as you would imagine people would be in this case. Now, I will then go a little more forward with this. I think the assumption, and this I do think is correct, what we're seeing is taking place, I'm going to say, sometime after the events of the Granite State episode of Breaking Bad, but before the actual finale of Breaking Bad. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, since we just podcasted about it just a week ago, Felina roughly is supposed to take place something like a year. Okay. Let me rephrase, because I know at the end of Granite State is when he leaves for Felina. I'm talking about before we get to the last minutes of Granite State. At least several months have passed. Maybe not a full year, but he does make the birthday thing. So I got the impression it's a year at that point, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Dan? Isn't that what it was? It's a year.
Yeah, pretty close to.
It's roughly a year. It's roughly a year.
Yeah, because like he had a 51st birthday party like on the show before, like he had to bail out on everything. So
right, and when he's in the Denny's, he makes the 52 again. Anyway, my only point, which was needless at this point, actually, is trying to guess how many weeks or months Saul Goodman has disappeared at this point, where they're clearing out his place in order for like an auction, which is exactly what I assumed it was being done for. Because I'm guessing at that point he's been implicated as being a key player in the whole Heisenberg empire, and that's why, like you said, that the asset forfeiture thing would be going on, I'm assuming.
Or it could be Howard. Howard might strike back and win a big judgment against Jimmy, and that might be the final laugh based on what we see early in these episodes. So could be a civil judgment by Howard, or maybe something to do with Sandpiper, or what would be really interesting is if it was Kim. Like Kim got pissed and joined and sued Jimmy and took all his shit, but...
The Kim thing is interesting, especially since at least one of the items that we see is definitely a Kim possession. It's a painting, I think, that we saw in her own apartment at one point. The guy who's carrying that painting down the stairs, that's a Kim painting. There's a whole, I have no intention or desire to start trying to knock off all the different Easter eggs that we see. I think a lot of things that we see, we don't know what they are yet, because they're probably things that we're going to see during the course of the rest of the season, but we certainly see a bunch of things that reference a number of episodes earlier in Better Call Saul, from, either be sneakers or beanie babies or stress balls and so on.
Did you guys notice that outside the house there's a big sign that said Saul Goodman and Associates, which isn't the sign that would be on his place in Breaking Bad?
I saw the sign. I was trying to think of where I've seen that sign before, because they certainly didn't use it in Breaking Bad, so it would have to be in between, right?
Yeah. So who are the associates? Well,
it might be those people that Kim had suggested to him that they grabbed from both HHM and the one that I'm not going to try to pronounce, that she had just quit.
Schweigert and Coakley.
Thank you. See, that's why we have you people here. Also, I'm gonna just to get it out of the way, because and Dan, I'm sure you can appreciate this. You probably thought it as well. My main enjoyment of this opener, this cold open, is it's clearly hearkening back to a certain classic film. And there's a massive movie still behind me. Again, it's an audio podcast, and I'm doing a visual reference. They're totally doing Citizen Kane here. And when we get to the end of the cold open, what essentially you could call the stand-in for Rosebud here is the tequila bottle opener, the cork from the Zafiro Anejo that Kim kept from their little scam that they ran together on old Ken Wins back in the season 2 premiere. I love how we keep coming back to that stopper, because I remember when she was quitting the law firm, she was about to leave, then she went back and she took it out of the drawer, but it keeps coming up over and over, and it is a really lovely work of art that they came up with. That's how you know that isn't a real tequila, because that's way too fancy. So my question beyond what we've already described here is, I know that we were, at least I was, and I think we were somewhat surprised we didn't see Gene. So my question to you guys, and we can kind of go in, sort of in order here, do like a Hollywood Squares, ding, 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 whatever. how did you really feel about the fact that we didn't get to see Gene? And my question is, number one, do you think we're going to see him in the first half of season 6, or are we going to have to wait until July? And Dan, you've already touched on this. The whole thing about seeing Saul Goodman's home for the first time, that he basically lived in this kind of a, what's the phrase? Like a cheesy kind of opulence kind of a thing. I mean, I know I don't think any of us really gave it, like you said, I don't think any of us ever gave it that much thought. And we know he was getting percentages of like the different deals with Walt, but clearly there had to be a whole lot of money coming in before that. Now, you have the seed money maybe from Sandpiper, but geez, he has to have been doing a lot of this money laundering bullshit on the side for a while to get the kind of money he has here, unless it's cartel money, although I don't know how much of involvement he has based on what we saw in Breaking Bad. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on it.
I think he was getting like 6 or 8% of like everything Walt was running, and Walt had, I don't remember how much he had in those all those barrels, but it was several $100 million. So if Saul would have earned 6 to 8% of that, because I think Heisenberg negotiated a lower percentage than his original, he would have got a cut of all of that. So, that's a lot of money. I mean, Saul could have easily got, 50, 60 million minimum just from doing business with, Walt once they, started shipping to the Czech Republic.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, don't they kind of pin the number, at least when he got to the barrel stage, at that was like 90 million at that point, or am I just imagining that?
It was something I can't remember how much was. We just watched it, but I just don't. My mind's gone.
I think it was roughly 90 million because the barrel they left him was like 10 million, and I think it roughly worked out to 9 barrels at 10 million a barrel or something like that. But I could be wrong. Jamie?
Yeah, all that. I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, right.
Wow, you're taking my place tonight. Thank you.
What Dan said.
I'm about to say, I need to go to Brian first, and you could have agreed with him.
There you go.
See, you
got it out of order.
There we go. We got
rough around the edges. It's been a few years since we've done this.
It'll be the whiny and the roses here.
Well, I think the two things that stood out to me is I think this is a house of someone who, I mean, if it was just drug dealer money, I don't think Saul would live that extravagantly because it would call attention to him. I think that probably legitimately him and Kim build something, and that's what the Goodman and Associates is, that there is an apparent genuine stream of revenue. Because even though Saul is kind of shifty and does crazy things, he's the only thing ever really that's been that loud about him has been his clothing. He never really went and bought like a brand new Mercedes coupe or anything like that, like to show off too much and be opulent. You didn't see him wearing like, $20,000 Rolex watches. So I think in my opinion, he's smart enough that there had to be some front for the money for him to have lived that opulently, that I believe he builds a substantial practice to get to that point.
So do you think the Liberace like decorative scheme is Kim's?
No, I think the garish stuff he likes, but but in that closet full of clothes, there weren't just tacky clothes. Like there were some pretty nice clothes in that closet. When they show the full closet of everything, there was some good looking stuff in there, stuff that didn't look sort of, like a used car salesman. So I think that it sort of is all throwing us into a guessing game about what time frame this is and when it is. And it's entirely possible Goodman and Associates could have been ran by Kim for at least a little while after he's gone, if she's the managing partner. So, I mean, you could extrapolate this could even be the downfall of Kim we're seeing, and he's been out of the picture a while if she was running a law firm with him gone.
I don't know if someone who drives a Cadillac with a lawyer up license plate is not about being gaudy or showing a certain level of awe. And
Cadillacs are still gaudy.
He's also a
but I mean,
TV.
it's like,
He's also a lawyer with
yeah.
TV commercials. And
Yeah,
his
but a
face
Cadillac
plastered
really
around town.
would appeal to his clientele. I mean, a Cadillac,
Yeah.
like an Escalade, that kind of thing. It's just, sure, it's expensive, but it's
But
it's not the least bit classy.
And we did
everything
have
we're
this whole
seeing.
conversation between him and Kim in this episode too, about what kind of car he should be driving.
The thing I wanted to get to and to cut to the chase here, which we're either tiptoeing around or just not saying at all. And the real question I want to ask you guys is and I think the point of what we see, in my opinion, is you're seeing this house and you're seeing what's being taken out, and we're seeing those closets filled with this, that, and the other thing, and whatever. It's ostentatious, it's gaudy, it's whatever. Question is, in the show that we're watching, we're seeing the quote unquote very beginnings of the creation of the Saul Goodman persona. It's even revealed during it, and we'll just jump to it now just for the moment because it was already mentioned here, that Kim is clearly playing a large part in helping to craft that persona. What I'm asking is, what we're seeing here, is this an indicator that what I'll call, and it always goes back to Batman, is the mask of Saul Goodman at some point, is that what becomes the man, or is his life always predicated on a level of pretense? Has he taken it to such an extreme that, to fulfill the Saul Goodman persona, I have to have that gold toilet. I have to have these ridiculous stained glass windows and sculptures and, fake Renaissance paintings by my bathtub and so on and so forth. Is this all continuing to be, okay, I have to keep putting on this act? Or has he become that? Has he truly, quote unquote, become Saul Goodman? And the reason why I'm reluctant to say it's just a message is because it feels like it's sort of invalidating a lot of what we saw throughout Breaking Bad because of this backstory we're obviously getting via Better Call Saul. But it's totally opinion until we see it revealed one way or the other for sure. I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on it.
I will jump in if that's all right. I want to say that the persona, I think it's a persona. I still think it's a bit of a persona. I don't think he has completely really become this person. And I say it not because of, what we're seeing in this timeline, not to go against what we see in Breaking Bad, but by what we see into the future. Somebody who truly becomes Saul Goodman, truly becomes him, I do not think can be a manager at Cinnabon effectively. It's such a polar opposite in personality and energy. And Jimmy has always been great at playing roles. And I just think this is just the role he was designed to play, but he's still playing it.
I don't mean to step on either of the other two gentlemen who certainly will have something to say about this, but I just need to pop in on this. I think and again, this is all just totally opinion right now. I think of it this way, however. The Jimmy we're seeing right now in Better Call Saul, as far as the events that just happened with Lalo and everything right now, and I'll jump into something I would have talked about later. Right now, we're seeing a man dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
The way he's reacting to things. Gene is suffering. I'm sorry. It's as clear as, I'm going to curse for the first time on the podcast today, clear as fucking day to me. He's suffering from clinical depression. And it's severe. Thus, and if that is what you're experiencing, what you're going through, and it's because it's kind of like when we talked in our last Breaking Bad podcast about Walt having lost everything. Well, so is he, and maybe he fell in love with his Saul Goodman persona, whatever, as we see in one of those previous Better Call Saul episodes where he even etches the initials about I think it was SG was here or something like that, whatever it was he did. The reason I'm saying that, and again, it's just a back and forth thing here, Jamie, but the fact that he's going through that is what can lead to such a significant personality shift or change. So I don't view his Gene as he's playing the role of Gene, although he is to the extent of he wants to be as polar opposite to Saul, the out there loud, everybody look at me. He wants to blend into the grays and beiges of the world at this point.
Right. But I think Gene is the most depressed.
Oh.
I think Gene is the most depressed version of Jimmy.
Yes.
If that makes sense. I don't think that Gene is a role. It's just depressed Jimmy.
Oh, he's just depression, period. But that's why I think he can be what he's doing. That's why I buy that. Anyway, I'll take it back to the other guys so they can pipe in on this one. 2, 3, 4. Someone raise their hand and talk, or I'm going to skip both of you. Okay, Danny.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with what you guys are saying about the, Gene's definitely depressed. I mean, it went from being Breaking Bad to Broken Bun, so it's fairly thing. But I kind of see the, at this point, we really don't know what's going to happen, of course, but I'm kind of thinking, it's just he kind of ends up using the Saul thing as like a, coping mechanism for his drama and stuff. I mean, if you've seen this episode, he's in pretty rough shape most of the episode, but when he goes on his Jew rant, I mean, he really, he kind of brings him to life and stuff. And I think after enough time of just, having bad things happen and him, even after Chuck died and stuff like that, jumping into the Saul persona, I think he just ends up using it as a coping mechanism, more than a personality shift. And then maybe at some point he just, something so bad that we haven't seen happen yet, he just doesn't come back from that point, until it all falls apart and he can't hide anymore.
I actually I would tend to agree with everything you just said, actually. Brian?
I think that Saul is who Jimmy pretends to be to stick it to the people who've always made him feel inferior. That's the successful person. That's what he believes he needs to be to show all the people that doubted him, to live up to Chuck, to show it to the Howards of the world who've always discounted him. That Saul is his armor he puts on to say, look, like, I make money, I'm big, I'm respected. I don't think he inhabits Saul in the same way Walter inhabited Heisenberg. I think that Saul is in him, and it's more of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde with him. Because even though we see this transformation, there are still little moments where I don't want to say he's a softie, but he's still just not, he's not an outright righteous, killer or bad guy. He does suggest, even when he suggests his trips to Belize, there's a little twinkle in his eye. But I mean, left to his own devices, I don't think he would arrange a trip to Belize. Someone would have to ask him to. But to inhabit that world, I think he is Saul. What we're seeing in this house, though, is that, he's let the bad mojo in, and that's become the interior of his life. But we don't know where that happens yet. So that's the great thing about the vagueness of it, that we don't know when that happens. We may see what you're asking about, but I think the guy we see right now is not there yet.
Okay, that makes. I'm willing to go along with that for now. I'll probably get a little bit. You actually touched on something I wouldn't mind me bringing up at maybe towards the end of the podcast. Something I had been thinking about when people compare this series and its main character to its predecessor, Breaking Bad. But I didn't want to say that we're going to go through the characters and start with Lalo and then spend the first half hour talking about Jimmy. When we get to the, as you said, the Jew rant, that's when I have a few things to say there. So, but we're going to save Jimmy and Kimmy for later. So let's pick up where season 5 ended. And that was when we were following Lalo's escape from near certain death. And Nacho was trying to escape the Salamanca territory after letting the team of mercenaries onto his compound. So I know I've noticed that y'all are really big Lalo fans. That's why we're going to start with him, especially because his storyline pretty much bookends the first hour, the wine and roses segment of it. And it's fun to note that the writing is very calculated and precise, as it often is on this series. So we've already been told in a previous scene that this overall area is all Salamanca territory, which means all these people he encounters, like the people at home, they're living on his land, kind of like, your little kingdom. It's almost like the little village it's like Downton Abbey. Never thought I'd compare those two. So Lalo does make his way in the beginning to one such home, and I figured let's talk about that a little, because I do love the fact that they do not necessarily spell out what's going on here, but you can certainly come to realize it during the scene, and even the subsequent scene, and then you start saying to yourself, oh, that's why he's asking about this guy Mateo's teeth and how he sent him to his dentist. Dental records. So my question to you guys, what did you guys think of this reintroduction to Lalo this season? And especially when we go from that to the scene with the cousins reacting to what we can deduce is supposed to be a burned corpse, which is a decoy for Lalo. And if you want to jump to the later scene with Lalo, that's fine as well. If anyone wants to raise their hand, you know what? I'm gonna make Jamie talk again, because I just like watching her little slow-mo talking there. Jamie.
My 90s camera.
Yes.
I just want to jump right into the scene where he is talking to Hector on the phone, and how excited I was about the scene and how it might possibly be, up to this point, my favorite of the series. Because we always get these, every season there's a little Easter egg that kind of tips us back to Breaking Bad, or we get a reference. This was the most exciting one for me, is to have this conversation one-way conversation on the phone where he's going through the alphabet and he's doing the charts that we saw at the nursing home. And to see that was this taught by people in the nursing home? Was this way of communicating taught by the doctors or the people in the nursing home? Or was somehow this something that Lalo came up with? But just that scene where he's on the phone with them and he's going through the letters and you hear the ding and the ding ding. It was like my favorite. There it is. That's it.
I had to go run and get the my Hector bobblehead, which has the bell on it while you were talking.
God had to go grab his dinger.
Yeah. Well, that's a different podcast. STVD After Dark. Daniel?
I thought it was an effect, pretty much the entire, all the scenes with Lalo were, an effective way of reminding us, Lalo's a really bad dude. Doom is coming for our characters in some form, possibly. Look at him, taking out, people loyal to him. He just, the dude's a total badass, and he's, a force to be reckoned with. And of course, watching the way, Gus slowly, losing his composure over the course of the episode. Am I really sure if he just is just having trouble, not having control of the situation? But I think, he knows that, Lalo's out there hunting him, and that's probably, at least some factor in what he's going through.
I would say the Lalo of this episode, it was a joy to watch him, because he was like a big cat on the savannah watching his prey throughout the entire episode. Like the guy and his mom, he's calmly, casually drinking coffee the whole time, like disassembling that shear that to do it in the cold menace. The two guys outside the truck, he's completely nonplussed by their attitude. He's just chill. But we see, the thing we always like about him is the charisma that he brings to the role. But, he takes the guys out and he gives everybody back their money. So you see, he's all the things that we don't like, and he does what he has to survive. But even in his world, like there's a certain code to him that, Nacho's a rat. And, in that world, rats get treated pretty harshly. But those dudes take preying on the people, as coyotes when they, don't play ball, he takes them out and gives the people back their money. Loved it. What this reminded us is he is a apex predator. And but for Hector reining him in, he was going to go straight to Gus Fring and take him out. And you see him as probably, there's a very good reason Gus Fring is so discombobulated in this episode, because Lalo is not to be messed with.
Right. Was that the guy? Was that supposed to be the guy and his mom? I thought there were a couple. I didn't really register that was his mom, but you might be right about that. So
it seemed like his mom, but I don't know.
Just didn't seem old enough, but maybe not important. But I just love that we saw that in the trailer. We were like, who's this Mexican James Brolin looking dude? And like, oh, he's just the guy that he's going to kill to sub for him. The thing I thought was interesting about the scene with the illegals and the coyotes, whatever, is to contrast that to the cousins who also were, going to let themselves be smuggled into the country, in order to, take revenge on someone. And the contrast between what Lalo does, what you pointed out, where, he makes sure that everyone gets their money back and whatever. And the cousins, correct me if I'm wrong, cousins pretty much kill everybody, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe the cousins are a little bit more brutal than Lalo, or Lalo, actually thinks about things. I agree, Jamie, I do agree. I love the call with Hector. It's so good. And I love that, the fact that Hector and the way Mark Margolis has to play and whatever. But the fact that he comes up with, the whole thing's like, no, you need proof, prueba. And, that's when it clicks, because otherwise, then you're going off half-cocked and you're just going to bring more disaster upon the Salamancas if you go about it that way. But by trying to get proof, which is basically Nacho, it just shows us that despite the condition that Hector is in, he still has a pretty high functioning brain, still rattling around that skull of his. The only problem, which we'll find out later, is that he maybe can't hide things as well as he'd like to. Go on.
I was going to say, but let me add, having had family members in care homes, for that girl to sit there and hold the phone that long, I thought that must be the best, convalescent home, rehabilitative stay person ever. That she was that patient to sit there and hold the phone for him so long, which either suggests they pay a ton of money for him to be there, that he's well cared for because they pay a lot of money, or that on some level they know he's Hector Salamanca, so you have to kneel down and wait 20 minutes for him to spell out a word. You keep your mouth shut and do it.
Oh yeah, basically I feel like they just got this might be like in the home from the show Derek or something, where they're just eternally patient with these people. But I have every reason to think that they know who Hector Salamanca is. So yeah.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression that Hector was deliberately letting Frank know that hey Frank, you're fucked there. I didn't think he was, he was just trying to fool Balsa, and act like it was a show, but I think he definitely was, being sure to let Fring know that, we're coming for you.
Yeah, but if jumping, but with Fring interpreting it as that's how he knows Lalo is alive, and they're trying to, and the whole thing that Lalo's trying to do is have everyone think he's dead. I don't know if Hector's, plan was, oh, by the way, Lalo's actually alive. That would kind of undercut their whole scheme at this point. So I don't know. I get what you're saying. I just don't know if he would have wanted to let on that much. But keep in mind, we'll jump to Gus just for a second. That's Gus. That's what we do. Gus has that. He's got special Fring senses.
Yeah.
He's a supervillain on the show. He's always able to sense things that no normal human. Wait, my car might have a bomb in it. I'm not going to get in that car right now. Or wait, just looks like, oh, I know they're lying. He's like the human lie detector. He should go on Australian Survivor or something.
The one thing that this episode has made me kind of realize is that it's theoretically possible that Hector is the only person in the Salamancas and the Eladio cartel that ever knows Lalo is still alive. So theoretically, Lalo, we've speculated about the first scene where, Saul is, name dropping Lalo, and we just figure, if there's any Salamancas still alive, they would have been involved in this, involved in that. But there's a chance that he's still out there, and everybody involved with the situation except Mute Hector thinks he's dead. He could still be alive in the Broken Buns timeline. So
I just went Breaking Sad. I just went with Breaking Sad myself, but okay. That gets into the argument. It's almost like watching a superhero movie and like, well, you're friends with so and so. Why don't they come and help? Or a TV show. Why don't they come and help? Because then the question is, you're putting out the idea that maybe Lalo just went into hiding or something for the next whatever couple of years, since he never got involved in any of the Salamanca stuff that happened in Breaking Bad. You know what? I like it because it's different than what I think people like me and other people have just assumed. That I assume Lalo is going to die at some point. I can't imagine everyone survives Better Call Saul. And if they kill Kim instead of Lalo, I'm going to blame you, Dan. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway.
I'm really just spending all of my energy being worried about Nacho's dad.
Oh, well, you should grab a drink with Mike. Clearly, he's very worried about that as well. But since you mentioned Nacho, and thank you for mentioning Nacho, because now we can get this back onto that train, because I really want to talk about Ignacio Varga here. This poor guy, at this point, he literally has like one dude in his corner, Mike, to some extent at least. But otherwise, we see that he's on the run from the Salamancas, and everyone else is under their influence in Mexico. And he's also a loose end that's been targeted by Gus. At least until Mike picks up the phone at the end, it's safe to say that, the Salamancas want him alive because he's the proof, he's the prueba, and Gus kind of would prefer him just to be dead. So let's talk a little bit about Nacho. And this is where we can also start folding in anything you want to mention about Mike and Gus, because we're going to, kind of hard to separate those two. I just want to make sure, because this is the podcast where everyone else has always raved how much they love Nacho, so I want to make sure he gets his due here, and we don't just skip him and go right to Mike and Gus.
Love Nacho. Love Nacho in this episode. Love the like second story parkour jump out of the window. That's like one of the baddest ass like filmed stunts that I have seen. I remember watching it thinking, man, that's a long drop, and the dude just jumps out and lands and goes on with the slightest hint of a limp. Not the usual movie where he's dragging his leg behind him like he's dead, but just a slight limp.
Truth be told, I think he hurt himself more getting that damn air conditioning unit out of the window than he did dropping.
And that's the kind of stuff I love about this show. The shot, like you're the air conditioner and he's hitting you, like when he's ramming into it and it's showing the view from the air conditioner. And I love the scenes at the motel because early in that, they establish a couple of shots. They use the horror movie thing where they do a couple of shots from inside the car, like somebody's watching him to build the tension. So that, at no point do you think he's being unreasonable, being worried that actually, even though he's there, he's being seen. But he is, like if there's a character through these two episodes that I'm pulling for more than him, I don't know who it is. And I'm not saying anything bad about Kim. We'll get to her. But I'm really pulling for Nacho here. Like he is surrounded, has no allies, and he's all alone.
Yeah. And if I could just add to where he is in that hotel room and he's hiding out, the way that they use the natural lighting and really created the cave feeling that he was trapped in this cave, it had a lot of similarities to me as as in Breaking Bad in their home. It was a lot of the same light, a lot of the same colors were being repeated, and it just, that shot was, I mean, I know it's its own show, but that shot was so Breaking Bad for me. Just the way that you could tell you were in the desert. You could be in a house, you could be in a hotel room, but with that lighting, you knew where you were.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Once the show started to touch on life or death matters, which it didn't do as much in the early seasons, outside of a wacky moment with Tuco here or there. But once it started getting more into the cartel and Gus and not whatever, you have these moments. That's when it becomes more reminiscent of Breaking Bad, because Breaking Bad had those intense type of moments more and more often. The other thing, also going along with what you just said, I think it's noteworthy to point out, and I know Daniel loves stuff dealing with lighting and cinematography. Watching these two episodes back to back, and I only did like a minor rewatch over the weekend. I watched like the final 3 episodes of season 5 before this. That was all I had time for, really. It's like it was a reminder of like, oh yeah, I remember now, because it's been a little while, that one of the weird or interesting, I would even say trademarks of Better Call Saul is, more often than not, interiors are shot very darkly. There's always a lot of shadow. It's like noir on hyperdrive because it's in color. Because I mean, think about the previous seasons. I mean, any scene, I'm not just talking about the scenes that happen at Chuck's house, which were always had to be super dark. But there would actually be spaces which it doesn't really make sense that lawyer's office is that dark, but we'll go along with it. It's like when he meets Kim at the restaurant, even though it's very darkly lit. Again, I love it, and I think it's not so dark where it's obscured. It's not it's not like some bad episode of Game of Thrones or something, but I think it's something that they really play with here. And when they can have a scene that takes place during the day, so you have like the natural light situation. So like, okay, now we're going to get shafts of light through blinds or curtains or whatever. And you get those really lovely shots of Nacho, in that motel room, looking out the window, walking around. It's a nice reminder of just how cinematic this show is, and it's a joy to look at as much as it is a joy to listen to, I think. Dad, are you just walking around your room? I love it.
I went out to my car to get a drink, and then I was getting ice there. So.
He's filming his new Smashing Pumpkins music video.
You really are in the 90s, aren't you, Jamie?
I can't seem to get out.
And now, Chumbawamba. So, there's what was it? One of you just touched on the idea. I think it was Brian, maybe. Yeah, it was Brian. It was interesting how, based on the way they shot a few moments, what you said, the horror movie perspective, it was almost like, in a way, trying to inform us that, Nacho's not just simply being paranoid. There actually is someone or something out there. I like that they did that. Part of me was like, I don't mind I wouldn't have minded spending a good most of that last hour with it looking like he was just out of his mind, paranoid, and then it's like, oh no, you're right, because that would have been something like straight out, like, I don't know, The Conversation or something like that. I love when he figures it out, and then when we get that reveal, I just love the way that whole thing is orchestrated. And that's when I guess that's the first time he actually realizes for sure that he's in a lot more trouble. His situation is actually even more dire than he originally thought it was. I love what they've orchestrated. Go on.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed with his resourcefulness, and I ended up being disappointed that because I kind of thought that maybe Frings people were using him as bait, which still isn't like, a good look for Gus. But I thought maybe they're using him as bait, and then like, when the people showed up to whack him, there was going to be, some of Mike's guys or whoever was going to be there to whack those guys going after Nacho. I didn't realize they just were like going to sacrifice him.
Right, but I think, they're going through a lot of trouble to try to distance themselves from Nacho. I mean, all the business with the safe and planting that letter there, and that's when Mike pockets the ID that's his dad, trying to keep his dad Nacho's dad out of the potential crossfire here. But I think it's just it's a lot of elaborate stuff being done just to kind of erase him. I love that moment when he's been trying to call Mike and Mike's not picking up the phone. We even see that moment, and you see that's kind of how that's eating away at him. I guess we can. I mean, at this point we can start talking about the Mike and Gus stuff, because I think there's something really significant there.
But I think there's something really significant that we haven't touched on about Nacho. And that is, like, he has his moment of choice where he can kill the guy who's just paid to watch him. And the guy even says, you're not going to do it. And, like, you see him struggle with it. And part of you wondered, like, is this going to be when Nacho really just takes somebody out, like, who's not, a totally bad person? And he doesn't. He, like, does the whack to the back of the head with the gun instead of killing him. And so most characters in this universe, like, take that guy out. He doesn't. And that scene plays out over a few minutes, and they really ramp the tension to make you wonder, is he going to go too far? And he doesn't. And I think that's important for his character.
Okay. All right, I'll go along with that. I think I was thinking on the other side of it that he firing a gun would attract attention at that point. That's why he doesn't do it. But if they've shown him to have. He's one of the few who has a genuine conscience throughout these 2 hours. The way he keeps inquiring about the older people that were at Lalo's compound, and of course. Tyrus. Never mind that Tyrus wasn't told about. Tyrus don't give a damn. By the way, the way Tyrus acts throughout this, should we assume that when we get into the Breaking Bad era now, is Tyrus considered one of Mike's guys or not? Because I'm starting to think, I don't think he counts as a Mike guy. So.
Yeah, I know. Mike refers to Victor as one of his guys, but I'm not sure if Tyrus counts as that.
Yeah, I'm thinking no, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, do any of you guys think that this Fring plan to sacrifice Nacho was just crap though? Because they just were telling the bad guys where or their enemies where he was, and they could, without realizing they could just take him alive instead of just shooting them themselves.
Yes, except, and this is what bothered me about it, is he goes in and he finds the guns on the bed. Like, there's a care package for him, and they've left guns. And at that point, if I'm him, I go, okay, so you can get me guns, you can get me a care package, but you can't get me out of here, and I have to stay here 2 days. You have people set that up so that when I walk in this place, like, I have everything I need except a ride. Hell no, I'm out of here. Like, that's the only thing that bothered. But I think they left the guns knowing if he was cornered and had to use them, there'd be a shootout and he'd be killed. Yeah, but yes, I think the plan sucks. But at that point, Gus overreacts in this episode, and he's overreacting. He's basically doing a Lydia, like, clear the board. And it would have been smarter for him to say to Mike, go get him, take some guys, go across the border, get him, and he don't make it back.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I think the show has kind of established that, like, getting across the border, like, is the hardest thing, one of the hardest things for them to do. Because, I mean, even Gus, after they whack Eladio and all of his people, I mean, Gus still has to, be crippled and walk across the desert to, get out. They don't really have an easy way back. So they presumably they wouldn't have an easy way back for Nacho a few years before that point if the big boss doesn't have a, smooth route back.
Yeah, and again, when when they dropped the fact earlier that essentially it's not just about a compound. This entire area is considered Salamanca territory. So it's hard to move or go anywhere without you're going to be stopped. There's going to be people on the road, whatever, whether it be mercenaries or just, everyday people they're all going to find out at some point they're on the lookout looking for this guy. So it's a very, like I said, it's a very dire situation for him. But you're right. It's also really fascinating to see how, the fallibilities of Gus here, that, yes, he's able to catch up. He's suspicious of Lalo being is still alive from the get-go. We can see that by the way he's acting and everything else. But you're right. The plan is like, is this one of your better plans? I don't know. You were doing so well with the plans before, Gus, and now you're kind of a little flibbity-jibbity. And I think it goes back to what you guys said earlier. This is a different kind of adversary for him. Lalo's nature is, even maybe unlike the other Salamancas, he's mercurial, but he's also very strategic and he's smart. He was almost going to act out on emotion and just go there. And Hector, of all people, is the one who brought him back from it. But I think Gus has underestimated him. And now he's continuing to kind of pay the price for that.
So you want to move on to Gus and Mike. You said that a second ago.
Yeah.
And I have a question I want to ask you all there. It does look like one of Mike's guys has the sniper rifle watching the compound. Is that guy also there to protect Mike if things don't go the right way with Tyrus and Gus? Because Mike does say later in that conversation, like, this isn't going to work out the way you think. Is that one of Mike's guys who, if things, is he going to take out Tyrus if they march Mike out or something goes down in that trailer? Because Mike
had the same thought, yeah.
Mike is bothered enough that this is the most openly defiant we ever see him be to Gus. Mm-hmm. Where he says, that ain't happening. I'm not going to do it.
I do think this is kind of maybe like, some point where Gus is kind of at a low point making some mistakes and Mike's willing to speak truth to power. And this might be Mike raising, Mike will raise in the ranks because of this point where he was willing to mm-hmm. Stand up and do the right thing. And then I think that's kind of going to change the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a really important thing for us to see with this scene is where Mike gets to step up a little bit and get in a higher rank position.
Interesting. Okay, let me try to tackle Brian. Try to tackle that little thing first because I hadn't really thought of it quite that way before. I would like to think of it that way. But I still think there would be such a level of risk because it'll be a lone man against what would end up being like an army of people. And I just don't know if Mike has that kind of sway or swing. But it is interesting to think of it that way. I think that's just Mike being confident in himself. That I could see Mike just as easily just grabbing that gun as anything because that door is closed at this point. I don't think the sniper would have a shot at Tyrus from that perspective, but I'm not sure about that. It's again that you could be spot on. I hadn't even thought of it that way. That's very interesting.
I'll tell you the only reason I think that, Scott, just to put a button on it, is when he's telling Gus like what he could possibly do. He says, "Let me get some of my guys." He doesn't say, let me get some of our guys or some of our people. He says, let me get some of my guys and go across the border and go get him. So, I do think, and we see in Breaking Bad, he does have a crew of dudes that he uses. So that sort of put that thought in my head that, if this was all one organization, he'd say, let me get some of our people and go. He says, let me get some of my guys.
It's interesting. I guess because I'm just thinking of it as I'm doing it in more of a in my mind more of a linear timeline, and we go from Mike ends up sort of like falling into the idea of work and ends up working for Gus, and I know he had to assemble a team of people when they were building, when he was working with the Germans and everything, when they were building that whole, that thing before. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Going to the crux of the scene, which is really the Mike being defiant, Mike being more openly aggressive and contrary to Gus than we'd ever seen him before. Bearing in mind, of course, that more than once before season 5 ended, Mike had brought up wanting to get Nacho out of there, and Gus pretty much kept blowing him off, and in a certain way. And now it comes to a head here. So it is the first time we've seen him this much aggressively opposed to Gus before, which leads to the showdown and the gun being pulled on him. And if not for Nacho calling and Mike finally deciding to pick up the phone, it'd be interesting to know how that goes. Now, the interesting thing, I think there's two different ways to interpret what happens, or speculative interpretations of what happens in the future here. You could say, oh, him being able to stand up and not be a yes man and being whatever speaks to why he might be considered, promoted, so to speak. My only issue with that interpretation, which I think it's a great interpretation, except I think it feels like at this point, Mike's already there. I don't see much different in Mike's relationship with Gus on that level now than what we see in Breaking Bad to a certain degree. I'm not getting it as much, at least. I think it's also possible it's the other way around. That this was a time where Mike felt he could go and stand up to Gus and be as aggressive as he is. And I think it could go the other way, and something happens to break him of that. That he is far less inclined to ever do anything like that again. Because unless I'm forgetting something, and I might be, God knows I might be, I think he kind of, throughout the Breaking Bad era, we don't really see anything even remotely like the level of Mike disagreeing with Gus and standing up to him during that time that we're seeing here. That tells me that something happens to kind of break him of that, and whether it could be just, I hate to say it, it could be killing off Nacho's dad or something like that, where, something that just kind of makes Mike realize this is something you can't do. Hence why he's the way he is in Breaking Bad, and the way he ever refers to Gus or talks about him or whatever. Again, it's just the way I'm thinking about it. So I don't know if it's just one man's interpretation here, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, at least.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Dan. I was just going to say real quickly, I think that it could be that relationship changes because he helps Nacho get away from Gus, and that's what, and won't tell Gus where he goes, and tells Gus a lie, and Gus knows it's a lie. But obviously the pain still of the German that he had to kill is resonating with him. And the talk about respect, and if somebody does you right, you shouldn't do him this way. Like, he's still hurting from what he had to do to the German guy, right. And he's not ready to do that again. Right. So I think you could be right, and that's the way I see it working. Is he does something for Nacho, and that happens.
It's also one more thing about the way he approaches the situation with Gus, more so now than he even did towards the end of season 5. I think it's very demonstrative of how different Mike is than someone like a Walter White, or in this case like a Gus Fring, two characters who have a lot of similarities, because it's always about power and control with these men. Unlike Walt, and certainly unlike Gus, Mike is not one that uses manipulation or even really much subterfuge when he's trying to convince someone or make a point. Because even like I said, even when Tyrus pulls the gun on him and everything, he's just someone who just makes his stand. He's got a spine of steel. I mean, to me, it's just as brave and gutsy as when, and maybe Gus should admire it, because it reminds me of Gus walking out with his arms outstretched when the sniper is taking shots at him, or even when Walter White tells Declan to, say my name. It's that kind of moment for Mike here, but just Mike is not given. I just think it's interesting. Mike doesn't play head games. Mike just speaks his mind and makes his point. And here it's it's just, he knows Nacho's done everything you've asked him and more, and really his dad, who's already been, had a level of collateral damage already, really shouldn't be part of any of this. Mike has a very clear, moral code. I don't think Gus really does. I think Gus likes to think he does or pretends he does. Think about the stuff with the children and the kids in Breaking Bad with Jesse and all that, where he says one thing, but clearly they do another. I don't think Gus really has a code, and that's not kind of like the difference between these two men. Wow. So.
This is what agreeance sounds like.
Sorry, I'll cut it out later.
But based on what you were saying too, Scott, about how Mike's behavior changes over time, and I think there's some more evidence of that would be Mike doesn't say anything, even though he's shocked at the time, but Mike doesn't say anything when Gus shanks Victor. So it definitely seems like at some point the dynamic is different than it is right now. Right. And when we talked about the shanking of Victor, it was one of those things when you play it back and you watch their reactions. Obviously, that hit him personally, and I think a lot of his increased resentment of Walt, who of course is who he blames for everything, was due to what Walt does leads to Gus killing Victor. And he ultimately blames Walt for that, as opposed to blaming Gus because he knows that's what Gus has to that's what Gus has to do now to make his point, whatever. Even if he doesn't agree with it, because that doesn't follow the code that he lives by. But he still blames Walt for it rather than blaming Gus for it. Because remember how angry he is that they ended up killing off Gus. There's never a sense of relief or I'm glad we found. You know what I mean? At least that's the way I'm looking at it. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what else we can go into here, or if someone wants to bring up something else while I flounder.
Oh, this is just a fun fact. When we were in Nacho's apartment shortly before Mike showed up, and we had Nacho's girls hanging out and practicing their domino skills. She brings up the world record of what's the world record of the domino pull. So I'm going to give it to you. A straight line or a sphere is 50,500 dominoes. But if you're going to go with the height, it's 8,044.
So she definitely,
and now
So she definitely needed at least one or two more.
She needed a few, a couple more packs.
That's what I thought was funny when she was saying, it's like, have you never seen those videos? I saw those videos before there was a YouTube. There's usually like thousands upon thousands of them. And they're usually it's like a Rube Goldbergian kind of thing where it's knocking over shit and cats are meowing and basketballs are flying and whatever. Oh, Lord.
It's like Mousetrap, just a giant game of Mousetrap.
Mousetrap.
This scene, this show does always manage to sneak in some good comedy. And, you talk about Mike getting to be the straight man. Like, he is such a great straight man in this scene when the girl says something to the effect of but I don't want to leave. I like it here. He goes, yeah, well, you're not going to live here anymore. You're going to try to like it somewhere else. You need to get your stuff and get out.
Now, my favorite line is, go find your family. If you don't got family, go find your friends. If you don't got any friends, make some.
Yeah.
I love that line. I was like, oh, that's so good, and it's so Mike. I really adored that little moment with him there. Speaking of little moments, just to flip it to, since we kind of packaged Mike and Gus here, one of the things I really liked a lot was during that scene with Mike in that compound office, whatever we call it, when Gus drops the glass. And the fact he takes it upon himself, he doesn't have some underling do it. He picks up all the broken shards himself. It's something we've seen before with Gus, in both shows, his very meticulous nature of how he doesn't like to leave anything to chance, which is what's interesting considering what's going on with Nacho. And I like it because I feel for Gus, it's like a tell. And it reminded me a little bit of something we brought up in one of our earlier Breaking Bad podcasts with Walter White fixing the table in the waiting room, hospital waiting room, while they're waiting to find out about, the surgery with Hank after the 1 minute episode. It's like both these men, who are all about, again, power, control, etc., and also believe they're the smartest person in the room all the time, I'm sure. But they have these little things where they just, things have to be just ever so precise and ever so whatever. Doesn't matter if it's a fly in a lab or a piece of glass on the floor, it has to be taken care of, and they take it upon themselves to do it as well. And it also reminds me of the fact when he works when he's at Los Pollos Hermanos, he's clearing tables and stuff like that. So I really kind of got a kick out of that. Oh, good Lord. We've got all the Jimmy and Kimmy stuff. What was I thinking? How could we have forgotten all that? All right. So let's move on to that. Because I like to think of them as our lawyers in love, except they didn't bother licensing any Jackson Brown for this anyway. So with them, they, that's an 8. I know Jamie likes 90s stuff, but I had to go 80s with that one. So once again, we're picking up with them where we left off at the end of season 5. So it's the morning after Kim goes pew pew with the finger guns. And like I had said early on, we've been spending so much time wondering and worrying about Jimmy slipping into Saul. A lot of viewers kind of took their eye off the ball because it's Kim who's really spearheading yet a major ethically challenged scheme here. We get that call back to the second best lawyer again, Travel Mug, which I had almost forgotten. It was Kim bought that for Jimmy when he passed the bar. But I like the idea of the way, and she'd seen it in the bag before, but she never said anything about it. But then here she throws it away. And I guess there's a little bit of symbolism in her throwing it in the trash because she's kind of putting the past behind them, not dwelling on the insanity of the past few days because she's ready to move on, both with her pro bono career as well as the Howard scheme. But like I mentioned earlier, Jimmy, and because it's interesting to watch what Odenkirk does in this episode up until the golf course, he's kind of taking understated to a new level, which is a little unusual for even the Jimmy McGill persona, but it's because he's only a day or two removed from what happened in the desert. So he's still talking and thinking and acting that way. The way his hand shakes before he even approaches the ADA and the detective and stuff, to say we can see how everything has taken its toll on him. Oh, and by the way, I guess everybody knows this out there, but we always like to point out when a Breaking Bad alum shows up, lest we forget Detective Roberts, who we saw a couple times last season, is most definitely a Breaking Bad alumni. He had been in many episodes of Breaking Bad before. So when you had the confused look on the ADA's face after Jimmy walks away when he accidentally name drops Lalo. Question: do we think, or are we assuming that his little Lalo gaff is actually going to go anywhere? Is it going to come back to bite him, or with the Salamancas, if not the authorities, are they going to put that together, or not? What is your take on that?
It more felt like, like just showing how messed up he is to make a mistake like that. But I didn't really think that they were going to notice it to follow up on it. But it definitely seemed like, maybe he will make some kind of mistake in the future if he doesn't get his head straight. That does have an effect, but I didn't really think that it's going to be a problem with this.
No, I don't think it'll be a problem. It's a misstatement that he covers fairly quickly. And I have a bunch of clients and, I think it's a very human thing, but I think Dan's right. He's right there on the edge, and it shows him go in that closed courtroom, which is kind of funny because I thought it was very symbolic that that's where, in many ways, early in this show, he was at his best, was going in that courtroom and owning it. And now he goes in there and like he's at his weakest and he's all alone in that courtroom. And I thought that was a really nice choice.
And notice yet another space that's not lit whatsoever. It's a darkened courtroom. You know, no, there are electric bills there in Albuquerque. They're not leaving the lights on if there's no one in there, apparently. Okay, so later it's when he goes to meet Kim, and I love the little gag of that he gets them. He rents a Ford Taurus, pointing out that it's taupe, not brown. And that's where we get the moment that we referred to earlier about when Kim starts popping out ideas about, you know, the kind of car Saul Goodman should drive, what kind of office he should have. I love the idea. And it makes perfect sense, and I sort of I just hadn't thought about it, but I anticipated it. That it looks like Kim has a lot to do with the crafting and creation of the Saul Goodman persona. It turns out that Saul Goodman might actually be more of a collaborative effort. So one of the things I love about that, like, as if I didn't love Kim enough, the fact that she is beyond instrumental in all this, she doesn't need to be raised up in any more degrees, but somehow she did. Somehow she is.
Yeah, she's definitely seems to be savvy when it comes to like, you know, like perception, like when she, you know, like has her client wear like a crappier looking suit than the one that Saul originally grabs, you know. Right. It's just like, you know, she's really you know, understands this kind of stuff.
Yeah, a few notes on that little conversation that they had in the cafe El Camino. How quickly Kim was able to pull this. It was almost like right at the very first of the episode when we first see them wake up in bed. You can see Saul stressing about some of the conversations that were had the night before, some of the things that he had just experienced within the last few days, and then when she starts bringing up Howard, how his face just drops, like, oh, we're going to do this. Like, you're really serious. So I really just wanted to note on that, where you kind of see her taking charge of everything. She's calling the shots. But I also wanted to just add, it was a strange moment for me when the waitress came over because it felt like the waitress had definitely interrupted the conversation. And in such a way, I thought for a moment, like, is this like a fan who won a walk-on cameo? Like it felt so disruptive, which again, I think was entirely important to this scene where Jimmy's just looking for something to interrupt it.
But what's interesting to me is that Kim picks up on his weakness and basically becomes like Uber him. That maybe that's an even smarter version of him, and sort of takes on his personality because she sees him being weak, and he's not really loving it. But he's keeping it to himself. He's not really being honest with her that, you know, he's not just down, he's actually messed up because of the stuff. Mm-hmm. And so she sort of overcompensates and basically becomes him. And there's a whole role reversal this whole episode. And as it goes on, she becomes more and more formidable in that role, to the point that, you know, you see actual genuine surprise and maybe worry on his face about how well she's doing in that role.
I think a lot of it goes to his guilt over what's happened with her that we saw from last season, that he holds himself to blame to how she's shifted. You know, remember he says things to her in the previous season like, "Am I bad for you?" Because he thinks he's led her to make these decisions, like quitting the firm and doing this, whatever. It all goes back to the very first scam they ran back in, you know, beginning of season 2. I think it kind of is, in his mind, I think it's all snowballing to where we are now. I don't know. I want to give Kim the benefit of the doubt as far as not being as craven a person as Saul Goodman is in the Breaking Bad era, and I am not going to forget that's actually how he does what he does become. Sometimes I think we kind of forget that because we're giving him so much credit for the Jimmy stuff, but Saul's not a great guy. Because I felt like that she is back. She is willing to back off it. I'm not reading it as being, or maybe I'm just giving it too much credit because I adore her. I don't read it as her being manipulative, although one could say, no, maybe she's just better at manipulating than everybody else is. So she actually gets away with it better. And that's actually, that might be the accurate way to look at it now that I say it out loud. But, I just don't want to think of her that way, you know? It's just.
Well, I feel like maybe she's a little bit more intelligent where Jimmy's a little bit more clever. And Jimmy has some level of longing for acceptance. And I don't think that Kim has that. I think Kim feels quite good about who she is and where she can go. And Jimmy's always just grasping for someone to see that he's remarkable.
And I think you hit on an important point. And I think the regret is that Jimmy is enough for Kim, but Kim's not enough for Jimmy. And, you know, like if they lived a life, she's happy supporting him in what he does, even if he doesn't think it's good enough. Yeah. She's not looking back at the past, regretting what she's given up. But she had a foot in that world that he never did. Like, yep. She understands that world. She understands those lawyers, those people, which I think, like you said, gives her she can more intelligently assess things in a way that he's clever with schemes. Mm-hmm. She can make those schemes even better because she knows how those people work. Like, I mean, do we think Saul ever really went in a country club before this, or knew people in country clubs, or did country club stuff? But, you know, she knew where he went to the country club. She knew he went and played golf. Like she had a foot in that world, which gave her the information to do something he would do, but in an even bigger way because she's intelligent. And I think him seeing sort of her taking those schemes to the next level, it worries him. Now, I don't think I agree with you, Scott. Like, we see the path he's on, and it's clearly not good. I'm not giving him a pass, but it would be interesting to think if her reaction to his sort of disability at this time is to become this person. If she was the nurturing person she was when he was trying to go too far, would that have, you know, how would things have turned out? And I think we'll see. That's the question this show is going to ultimately ask when she does something or goes too far.
Yeah, and I do kind of think, you know, I can't really put my finger on explaining it now, but the fact that she, you know, the more like lousy stuff she does, like, you know, she thinks she can balance it off by doing like pro bono work and stuff like that. And it just kind of feels like that's like problematic and not sustainable. I really can't explain, like, you know, somebody who's had less to drink and didn't drive as far today probably could put it in better words than me, but you know what I'm saying, I think.
Yeah.
So you're looking at kind of like a karmic balance for her that she can ethically, she can rationalize doing something like the Howard scheme because she's doing this, you know, pro bono work, a day that others such as Jimmy would look at as a day of hell, and for her it was like her best day ever, professionally speaking, because now she's finally doing something where she's helping people as opposed to helping to get the rights to add a wing to a bank somewhere or something like that. Yeah. No, I think there's actually a lot of validity to that. I think, and quite honestly, I think people in general often think that way. That, you know, it's kind of like, okay, I can get away with this because I've been such a good person, so I can it's almost like being on a diet, but I can have this, you know, I can cheat on, you know, this one time, this Saturday night or something like that. We've mentioned the golf. I'm sorry, did you something else you wanted to say?
I just got one question for you guys too. And the opinion on Walt, and how people perceive him as the course of the Breaking Bad series goes, it differs wildly and stuff. But do you think that we might get to some kind of point where we like at least some of us are going to actively dislike him? Well, many of us, got soured on Walt at some point. Do you think there's, it's potentially that she's just going to, break bad, I guess, to steal a super obvious term? Do you think that's possible at this point? I think it'd be really interesting if they managed to do that. Not that I think they would do it deliberately, but I just think as a concept of a character that we really liked and whatever. I think it'd be if that managed to happen, that'd be a neat trick. Not that I'd be happy about.
I think it would be remarkably impressive if they could convince the audience to dislike her. I think odds are it will be more along the lines of like, no, God, stop. What are you doing? But
yeah,
man, if they could pull that off, that would be something.
I agree. I don't think it will go that way. What I foresee is like him telling her like they're done and not wanting to say it and pretending like, basically the phone call Walt had with Skylar where he said terrible things to her to protect her. Mm-hmm. I think like he'll do something like that if she survives, or he may even try some scheme to protect her that backfires and she ends up, collateral damage. But I don't think I don't think we'll feel as bad about him as we did about Walter White.
No, I'm wondering if like at some point where like Saul will try to like back her off from something and she'll say like we're done when I say I'm done, kind of like Walt says to him. It's in the show. It'd be really interesting if that happened in some degree too. That probably won't happen, but
I like that idea, and I like the permutations of that he tries to push her. I mean, it could be he tries to push her away, he doesn't push hard enough. Or he tries to get her not to do something. He doesn't do it hard enough. I mean, there's a lot of permutations, but I think in the way that whatever he becomes, this will be the story of how he got there, and it will have more sympathy in it than Walter White's story did.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah. I would really be surprised to see there be decision making and things that Kim does over the course of any scheme or time that cost people their lives, which is where I think a lot of from season to season, the anti-Walt stuff kind of built up, less so than him just being an asshole, which, you could say that was there too, but it wouldn't be. I don't think there would have been such people abandoning Walt in droves if it was just a matter of him just being an ass. And I don't think he was anyway. At least not until towards the end or there. It is interesting to think of it that way. There's something I wanted to. This is going to be part of something I kind of want to talk about a little bit right when we finish up this. But so I don't want to get ahead of myself because it would kind of fuck up what I have in my mind to talk about later. So let's get to the Country Club since we keep mentioning it, then walking away from it. And it's interesting that, and I think you guys one of you might have mentioned it already, that this is kind of what re-energizes Jimmy. That and because he had been in that kind of slightly mopey, morose state up until he's activated by his encounter with Kevin Wachtel at the Country Club, and when he does his whole routine which I'm going to get into in a second. Before we do, I want to make sure I give a shout out to an actor here who I love, who was in this episode. I want to give a big thumbs up to the casting of James Urbaniak as Norm. He's the hapless Country Club employee who is about to give Jimmy the tour. Oh, by the way, you guys can call him Saul all you want. He's still Jimmy, so I'm still referring to him as Jimmy. So just so you know, that's just me.
Yes, I kept expecting Norm to give Saul a cute nickname.
He's a character actor I've loved for years. If anyone sort of recognized him, you might remember him. He played Robert Crumb in the American Splendor movie, which is great movie. And he was also one of the few running characters in every episode of the great Comedy Central series Review. That was the one with Andy Daly. He was the really horrible person who was the producer of the show. So good.
And let me say, I had a double shot of him this week because he also plays a really creepy FBI guy in For All Mankind.
That's right. He's in I think 3 episodes. That's right.
Yeah.
And when he popped up on that, I was like, oh, the perfect guy to be this horrible asshole.
Yeah.
Now, I feel I kind of have to say something that might differ about what Jimmy does at the country club because, my bloodline and whatever. Being actually one of the actual chosen people to begin with, I'm going to say something I've never said on any of the previous podcasts. At least if I have, I don't remember saying it.
Scott, I love you. I love you too, Scott. Thank you.
Oh, that's sweet. So, like I said, I'm one of the actual chosen, as opposed to a fake one like Jimmy Saul Goodman. I'll say that I was mostly fine with this whole bit. I will also say that I've always had just a little reservation from the beginning with Saul Goodman. Back when they first introduced the character and he makes the comment about with the Jewish name and whatever. It's one of those things I'm always like, and then I kind of shake it off because I love everything else about the character and I love Bob Odenkirk and everything he does and whatever. But I would also be lying if I said there's not always a little part that kind of makes me cringe just a little bit, And his routine is hysterical, especially, when he pinpoints the word money grubbing and all the things that Kevin is ranting. Like, see, there it is. There it is, whatever. And I'm like going, it's funny. I like this, but there's just a little part of me that gets bothered by it, but not aggressively, but I have to be honest, as much, and this is literally like my favorite character from Breaking Bad and one of my all-time favorite people, Bob Odenkirk, but I can't say it doesn't bother me, at least to a slight percentage. So just putting it out there. The thing that's interesting with the golf course thing, and it goes to what you were saying about how this is a man who's probably never been, it's not probably. He even says to Kim about how she has to teach him how to play golf one day. So if he hasn't played golf before, then he hasn't been to a golf club before. It's just the way those meetings go. The thing with Jimmy, or one of the things with Jimmy, and it goes along with what you guys have said earlier, to him, a lot of it is about class. And I don't mean not having class, I'm talking about, the class system. And how he's always kind of having to punch up. And that's why he has his issues and opinions of people like Howard and and the way Chuck would look down on him and so on and so forth. And how that's the kind of confrontation which is going to be what will reinvigorate him. It's because he will always perceive himself as, the little guy, and he has to punch up at these, at money and power that's above him. And Kevin, the fact that he's a CEO of a goddamn bank is almost the epitome of it. That, I think, is what charges him up from this point on, even though it goes in a different direction later on with the Kettlemans. But I like that because it was like, oh, this is the first time that in this premiere that we see Jimmy starts being more like Jimmy. I mean, he does a little bit with the ADA and the cop, but him kind of faltering with the Lalo thing kind of undercuts that. But here, he's in more pure Saul Goodman performance mode. That's which I found really kind of fun about that whole sequence.
He feels righteous in this moment, like that. I think like that could go two ways, but when the Wachtel does it in front of everybody and basically tries to embarrass him in front of everybody, which is, his sort of weakness that never feeling good enough and always being looked down on. When in that moment he is looked down on, like he just makes the most glorious scene, and Urbaniak's discomfort in his character the whole time this is going on, and seeing people try to pull Kevin away, and the people in the dining room going, oh look, Lovey, a disturbance. Sorry, that's an old reference.
I said this was not the Gilligan verse. Did you not hear what I said earlier?
Well, but it's a wonderful scene where the comedy is like attached directly to his character and what's happening in the moment. It's not played for laughs per se. It's there for humor, but it is connected to something real. It's not just a bit like that they threw into the script, right? Like it's consistent with his character and what happens. And he actually uses it in a really good way to cause this scene clear out and then, make a modification to the plan.
What I add to that, one of the things that's really, well, first of all, I'm going to give Wachtel a break here. Wachtel certainly has, or let's call him Kevin, so I make sure I know I'm pronouncing it correctly. He has every right to not care for Jimmy, because people might have forgotten what Jimmy did, where he basically had threatened with a huge, nasty smear campaign and was going to sue him for their logo and all this other stuff. That was his last time he encountered Jimmy. So he kind of got a little bit of a reason not to like the guy. But what's really great about this, and I forgot, it's a little bit of a trope with Jimmy or Saul when we get into Breaking Bad. It's him able to think on his feet in the moment because he hadn't planned any of this, right?
Yeah, that's how I saw it. I just kind of saw him, he was being really resourceful. Like he had a mission that he had to do, and he had to just figure out a way, when it fell apart, he found a way to make it happen like right away. And he managed to have fun while doing it, which, he clearly likes doing and needed to do at this moment where he's been depressed and not sleeping and whatever. I'm sure pulling this off made him sleep a little better that night.
And I'll call it the trope or whatever, however I want to refer to it, or just the thing he does, and you can rewind your mental clocks and how many times you've seen this before. When Jimmy is presented with a situation, and it may not be exactly what he had anticipated or thought was whatever, he will start to walk off, and then he comes back. We've seen him do this at least 2 or 3 other times minimum on this series. Probably did it on Better Call Saul too, but he definitely has done it here. And I remember thinking, oh, they're doing that again. That's a thing. Because he walks off, and that's like he's gathering, and someone's like, oh, here we go. Now I know what to do. It's kind of like, and kind of like turning away from the camera, then turning again, and now my impression of a righteous Jew,
And in many ways, like he's actually better at improvisation than he is at actually planning and doing something. Whereas Kim is really good at the planning of something.
And really, he just shines anytime he gets an opportunity to make people that he sees as thinking they are of higher caliber. When he feels like he can bring them down a peg or make them feel guilty or embarrassed, that's when he really shines.
Right. And I think that is part of why people have continued to really like his character throughout this series. It's kind of like what they say about comedians. He's somebody who always punches up. He doesn't punch down. And you're always going to root for that type of person, especially when those that are presented as those that you're punching up against are not perhaps the most likable sort either. I can't let this go. One thing I will defend, not that Kim or anyone needs any defending, but as far as her improv skills, although we got to give her credit, lest we forget, the end of Bad Choice Road. What she does with Lalo there, thinking on her feet, is still probably the most impressive thing we've seen on the series to date, as far as anything else. But otherwise, I do agree with that. Sentiment, whatever. Can we get to the Kettlemans now? Can we please get to the Kettlemans? I was really hoping to keep this in.
You mean the other co-creators of Saul's aesthetic?
And just to get a moment of sleaze out of the way here, I just want to say I continue to be amazed by Better Call Saul and even the late lamented, or not so lamented, Preacher series. I will confess I've always had a little bit of a crush on Julie Ann Emery, and both of these shows go out of their way to have her let's say her look tends to mirror the rather horrible person that she's playing. So she always seems a bit off and unsettling looking and whatever. And she's really anything but. But I love I love the fact that they brought them back. It made me so happy to see the Kettlemans again. That, as much as happy as we get when we see Breaking Bad people show up, I was equally thrilled to see Betsy and Craig Kettleman shine. And we knew that was I think they kind of gave that away in one of the trailers that they were going to show up again, which I was kind of like, oh, don't tell me that. I would have liked to have not known that. But I was so excited to see them back again.
And they can react to Howard being on the Devil's Dandruff, too.
The Devil's Dandruff. Oh, my Lord.
I mean, and is there a sweeter guy to go up against than Craig? Oh, poor Craig. Poor gullible, sweet, lovable Craig.
Poor henpecked Craig. But I will say that the beautiful thing about this scene and the whole thing is that in both relationships, the woman is the one that exercises the power. With Craig, it's her, and Saul comes in and does his stuff, and she ain't buying it. And then Kim is the power of the four. Kim leaves the arena as the number one ranked, pound for pound champion of that trailer. And it was really remarkable. The scenes that happen, Jimmy trying to sway him and knowing that it's bullshit, and her pulling one over on him, thinking she has, and it's what he wanted to happen. The little smile after she says, "You're fired," and I'm going to go to Howard. I love this scene because every character's motivation is understandable. The Kettlemans have every reason to be upset and not trust him, but Craig is just the lovable lump. She's the hard charging wife, and I loved it. I love seeing the Statue of Liberty balloon out front. I loved the set. I loved the lobby of the trailer. And they set up right away with the check.
When Jimmy walks over and you get that up shot of him next, and you can see the Statue of Liberty balloon in the background. It was another one of those squee moments for me. I was so excited about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Craig, fucking himself by saying dial 9 to get out was definitely made the 2-year wait worthwhile.
Yeah.
He's just so nice. He's such a freaking schmuck.
Yeah, I do like the idea of, especially when you look at the opening moments of this episode, that there's a weird kind of parallel between Betsy and Craig and Jimmy and Kim. Because for the first hour-ish or whatever, how understated and almost mild-mannered for the most part Jimmy is, and that's Craig to a T. Because Betsy's clearly the alpha in that relationship by 1,000. Even although apparently it's Craig who went away for a little while and not Betsy. So she's probably a little smarter than him too.
And that tax preparer scheme is her. It's not him.
Oh yeah, of course. I also, even though we're going to get more into the Kettlemans, and I do go to see him at one point, I feel it would be inappropriate for me not to have also mentioned I'm always happy to see Ed Begley Jr. show up again as Cliff Main, as we see him in the scene between the golf course locker room when that little packet of what's apparently actually baby powder comes out of Howard's locker, and then later on when we're at the law offices and we see what would her position be? Is that woman an associate at this point? Because I think she's a full-fledged lawyer, if I recall, when she was working with Jimmy before.
Yeah, I think Erin was just an associate.
Yeah, she's an associate, right?
Or a paralegal or something. I don't remember.
No, I think she's more than. I think she's beyond a paralegal. I think she's higher than a paralegal. But
Whatever she is, she tried to save him the time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, because she was Jimmy's like assistant for a while, but she might have got promoted after that or something. Brian probably, but no, Brian understands the workings of these things. Fucking Brian understands.
She's probably his paralegal in the real world, but I think in the show she might be an associate. Usually, like, associates don't like take messages from the desk and go back to the boss. Usually, that's your paralegal or maybe even the office manager type person, if there's a special situation. But yeah, I mean, clearly she's advanced, and you see just in the way she walks and talks and acts, she's a much more competent person than the last time we saw her.
Right.
Yes.
I'm just recalling of how heavy her involvement was with Jimmy in the Sandpiper case, and I did not have the impression that was purely paralegal stuff. I thought she was operating as well in some lawyerly capacity, albeit a young. But I don't remember for sure, and and I haven't looked it up online because I don't really care. So I'll go by what you guys said on that one. So yeah, it's all about them planting the seeds about Howard potentially being a cocaine user, which I love the idea that earlier on it was like, okay, we're just gonna hurt Howard a little bit, just his reputation a little bit, and then okay, so you're going back-to-back podcasts are gonna make a reference. So you're gonna go clear Hunter Biden on the dude and just paint him as a cokehead or something. Like, okay, why do you think he's so positive all the time? Oh yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense. So we do get to that major scene later on where we discover that Jimmy apparently is the carrot and Kim is the stick in this situation. Now what's interesting is because we already have a predisposition not to care for the Kettlemans. I mean, they're fun, but it's not like we would root for them. So what Kim does, we're kind of like, oh, it's totally awesome and cool, and you're totally rooting for it. Even though it's still, there's something a little bit shitty about it, but she covers it because she basically uncovered the fact that, yeah, you're kind of scamming people right now. That's why I'm calling, the fraud department or whatever the hell it was with the IRS there. It's interesting that Jimmy still gives them money.
It's not because she did what Jimmy doesn't do and doesn't have access. She pulled on a lever of power and used it against him. Like, she was able to call and get right through to a powerful person and put them in their place. That's not, Jimmy doesn't do that. He doesn't have access to that, and that's not his world. Like,
she pulled the Lalo, it's a Lalo, and then in the end they get their money back.
But
Yes.
The point I was making, there's nothing she does or accomplishes there that makes me go, wow, I can't believe she pulled that off. It's totally plausible. So what I'm saying is, what surprised me is, even after all that, Jimmy still gives them money. That's the thing that he didn't need to do or have to do. It's kind of an odd little thing. It's kind of like, he still has, and in a way it's like, you're Jimmy. You're not Saul Goodman yet. Saul Goodman doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. So I found that to be a very interesting move on his part. Because she says, you gave him the money. It's like, he didn't have to. But he's still, here's the difference between what Jimmy is now and what Saul Goodman is later. Jimmy still has issues of guilt. It could be about Chuck. It could be about what's going on with Kim. It could be about what happened with the Kettlemans to whatever degree. Saul in the Breaking Bad era, guilt, not such a big thing for him. Not compared to what we see in his past here. Not at all.
Totally agree, but if Kim doesn't use powerful people to threaten him, he doesn't give him the money.
No, but he didn't need to give them the money. They'd already accomplished their objective by Kim leaning on them. So he didn't have to after that fact. I mean, it was completely secondary. It didn't accomplish their goal in any specific way. It was Jimmy specific because they already said they weren't going to fucking tell anybody.
No, that's
Well, it kind of matches up with a few things that we've brought up with the other characters. I mean, I was kind of joking about like Lalo, but I mean, we've got Nacho who didn't fire the gun. We have Mike that saved Nacho's dad's identification. There's a lot of this that has been repeating, like these options to do something that isn't necessary, but you just do it because there's a fraction of goodness in there that stops you for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you meant, like Lalo making sure that the illegals get their money back at the end of there. Although I guess they could just go through the guy's pockets; they would have found the money anyway. But at least he says it. I totally, and I'm 100% agree with what you said. I'm just going to use a different word. Just because it's just a more highfalutin word, because that's who I am. I'm not going to say goodness. I'm going to say humanity. That they still have, they're still, because a lot of these things about people and how and when we're watching these transformations, whether it be in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, it's watching how people potentially end up losing some part or all of their humanity. And that's the thing with Saul that we're going to see. Like the first time we see stuff with Saul is like when he talks to Jesse about him giving the money to Andrea and why the kid doesn't do it himself. But before that point, we've not seen that side of Saul. And that's only a fleeting moment. We really don't get that with Saul during the course of Breaking Bad. The only reason that we kind of don't think of Saul that way is because you have him on screen with some of the most, with Walter White when he's gone full-blown Heisenberg, or when he's dealing with Mike threatening to beat the crap out of him and stuff like that. So yes, he's going to look better compared to these people. We're going to ignore the fact he suggested killing people multiple times on the series. Not once, not twice, many times. So again, I think, come on.
I think another really great thing about that is in reflection to Kim's relationship with him, because she knew after all that, she knew that you still gave him the money. Because she knows who he is. Chuck would have never assumed he would give that money. I mean, given the same circumstance, Chuck would automatically have assumed that Jimmy wasn't going to do that, right? Or Howard necessarily wouldn't believe that but Kimmy knows who he is and knows that he has a weakness there. That's not really a weakness, but for lack of a better term, that kindness is there, that humanity is there, where others don't see it.
And Jimmy has empathy for criminal fraud people, whatever too. So I'm sure.
Empathy, perfect. Thank you.
I just think it's interesting because I don't think Jimmy does that in season 1, but he would do it now. Season 1, Jimmy's not doing that, but now it's because when Betsy goes on and on about what the impact it had on their lives, yes, they were, committing crimes and blah, 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 but it's the overall impact. And when he sees what's happened to them, again, guilt kicks in. He's a character that keeps being assuaged by guilt, which is really a fascinating quality for him because that is something that we don't really see much of in Breaking Bad. So I wonder, at a certain point, when does Jimmy or Saul, whatever we want to call him, when does he lose the guilt trip factor that seems to keep dragging him down here?
It goes back to something you were talking about earlier about comedy. The reason he gives him the money and when we'll know he's broken is when he starts punching down. Like these people, they've fallen, that kicking them while they're down and hearing their whole story. I mean, you can just say they're bad people, but when you actually dig in and hear their story and see their circumstance, that what he's doing, he tries to give them the money because he sort of feels bad about it. And then Kim really hammers him and, it's punching down and that's why he feels bad. And when he finally starts punching down, that's when he'll be Saul and Jimmy's dead.
I like that. I like
Perfect.
that. I like that a lot. two things, and unless anyone else has something beyond those two things, because I kind of want to get this done within two.
Yeah, well, while we were talking about the money, I looked up Erin, and she's listed on the Breaking Bad wiki as a first-year associate at Davis and Maine. So Scott seems to be correct, and it pains me to say that. So good job, Scott. Bad job, Brian, Dan, and Jamie. We suck.
No, I said in a real firm she would probably be a paralegal, but it was possible she'd be associate.
Yeah.
See, this is why we have Brian, the legal expert, on, because in real life it would be. All right, two questions. One silly, one serious. Silly one. Okay, so does Jimmy eventually make a deal for their Statue of Liberty balloon? Because we're assuming it's got to be the same one. Did someone? I don't know if someone made two of them. So I kept thinking he was going to buy the balloon from them. Maybe after they go see The Office on Saturday. That might be where that goes. And of course, the big question: who's following them? The last shot. Someone's following them. Who's following them? Wow. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
My first thought was Lalo, but that doesn't make sense. My second thought is maybe Howard is having somebody follow them. So the more thoughtful thing is that, like, Howard sees that there's, like, he knows that, like, people are, like, talking shit about him. So maybe he's just kind of, after what happened with the bowling ball and such, maybe he realizes that there's something going on, and Howard has somebody. Maybe Bill Burr's following them, and Howard's the one that set it up. I don't fucking know, but regardless, there's something going on there.
Howard. Oh, that makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah, because if Lalo's quest is to, like, get evidence against Fring, I don't see how that has anything to do with Jimmy and Kim at the moment.
No, that would be a separate issue. But I feel like there's something we're forgetting. But that's why I threw it out to you guys, because I figured maybe you guys might remember something that I've forgotten. We do an amazing podcast here, people.
Yeah, it's Kimmy's apartment manager. She's just followed her to thank her for finally throwing her shit in the trash and stop throwing bottles in the fucking parking lot.
I think it's somebody associated with Kevin Wachtel, that after him showing up at the club and stuff, I think that, he does everything deliberately, and he knows he's a scheming person. I think that after that show at the club, that he had somebody follow him. And I'd love to see more of that actor. Like that's, yes. Maybe that's wishful thinking. I love that actor, and when he's mad, he's awesome when he's mad. So that's my guess.
Very interesting. I like the Wachtel thing. Very nice.
Yeah. Well, yeah. My question is, with 11 episodes left, do you think that anybody's actually going to get sent to Belize? Do you think that reference is going to get filled in on this back end here?
I didn't realize you meant literally. That's actually a good thought. I could see that. I could see them doing that, and that could be where he gets that from. I don't. It's kind of like Jack's tattoos on a certain show. I don't really need an explanation for how he comes up with Belize, but that would be kind of funny if that turns out to be the case. I'm also gonna. I forgot to do it last week when we did our little Better Call Saul preview thing. But Dan, I've been waiting patiently for 7 years now. I'm probably wrong, but in that little quickie 30-second trailer for the season of Better Call Saul, there's a brief shot of these pink high heels and fishnets.
Oh yeah, I noticed that.
You know who I think that is? I'm hoping Windy Wendy is gonna fucking show up finally. She has to.
Yeah, I saw that, and it's like, well, maybe Kim will end up being the general counsel for Mug Rip Beer. I mean, who knows?
Hey, you know what would be cool is, there's been this talk of drug stuff. What if Hank is following him? What if the DEA has started following him because of his representation of Lalo with the false name and him possibly disappearing? And you have the police officers, him dropping a name. What if it's Hank?
And you bringing him up actually kind of made me flash to, the scene where we've got Nacho going through the tunnels under the road. Like, I immediately like went to the thought of Hank. So yeah, I like where you're going on that.
Yeah, my thought was like, the culverts in Mexico probably aren't that new looking, but
They are pretty shiny.
yeah, that was a super nice culvert.
Right. All right. Yeah. Okay. So,
Did,
you know what?
did any of you guys think that there was any significance to the time machine book being showed multiple times? Do you think that there's any like a deeper meaning? Anybody give it any thought to? Other than just to show the transition of time.
I mean, I saw the book initially in the cold open, and then we see that's what he's reading. So it's just kind of just to connect those two as far as it being symbolic of anything. I mean, you could go a lot of ways with that, depending how much you want to get into the story of the actual time machine. But it could just be a play on the transition of time and how this is a show that's kind of built on it's telling a story both in the past and in the future, and now we're watching a scene where it's like, okay, it's somewhere in between. When is this exactly? Is it kind of sort of the past, or this is a week ago? I don't even know anymore. So I don't know if there's anything more to it. That's interesting. That's interesting.
I will say a final fact I'd like to throw in that I read or heard somewhere from Peter Gould, I think, who said that the cold open, that there are a lot more Easter eggs than people even realize in it, and that by the end of the season you'll be able to go back and see that there was a lot of stuff in the cold open that is, sort of pointing a direction that we don't know right now. So I thought that was interesting.
Right. Each one of those ties we're going to see in a future scene, and we'll know that, oh, that's the tie he was wearing when she gets shot through the face. Anyway, so unless anyone has anything else, I would like to start to wrap this up. So we're going to go a little over 2. Oh, God damn it. All right. So if you enjoyed this podcast, guess what? You'll enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. And guess what? My screen just went dark and I have to unlock it so I can't see anything. So give me 1 second here. Wow. It's the serious TV drama that's never happened. 339 podcasts. It never just went all dark on me. It was like Kim and Jimmy were having dinner in my room or something, which is also very darkly lit. It's a serious TV drama podcast page. Like the page, and you can join the conversation about shows like Better Call Saul and so many others. You can find us You can find our podcast pretty much everywhere that podcasts are available, like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify. But best of all, you can find all 339 of our podcasts on stvdpodcast.podbean.com. Funny, I had actually stopped to remember what the hell it was. Follow us on Instagram. Our handle there is Serious TV Drama, all is one word. And you can also follow us on the Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. STVD as in Serious TV Drama. We will be back next week to cover the next episode of Better Call Saul, which, as Danny alluded to earlier, it's also following the Something and Something format. Title-wise, I believe it's titled Rock in a Hard Place. Never heard that phrase before. Then maybe I might get into a little bit of the. I would have done it here, but since we already hit the 2-hour mark, it's too long, so I'm going to wait till next time maybe. Where I just want to do a brief thing talking about comparing people's opinions and about the whole Breaking Bad versus Better Call Saul thing, and why that might be a bit more skewed than people realize because of how they view the main character. But we'll just do it as a preview because I'd rather wait till next week to talk about that now. And I was also going to rant about another podcast, but no, I'm not going to do that. So I want to thank you guys for
that podcast.
Yeah, whatever.
Douchebag.
So I wanted to thank you guys.
I'd say we did pretty good. 2 hours for 2 episodes is pretty solid. So good job, guys.
Solid work.
Yeah.
Other podcasts can all die and go straight to Belize.
Yeah, whatever one you're talking about, we hate them.
Yeah, they can dial 9 to get out.
You guys. So I'm going to say arrivederci to everybody out there, and we can go in our usual order. Each one of you can make your own goodbyes, and then I'm going to click the button. So, goodbye to everybody else, and we can start. We can start with the kids before we get to you know who. Or we can just have silence, because
Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Good night, everybody.
Yep. Good night, guys.
If I went up and played with him and then he punched me in the face,